Hi, everyone, and welcome to weeks 5 and 6. This week we are doing something called pushing the edges, meaning that we need to go deeper into the impact of trauma. And trauma affects our brain, um, not just in the limbic system, but a lot in the limbic system. And that's where we take our emotions and um, that's where they're managed. Our hippocampus, another part of our brain that is associated with memory, is also very much part of this process. So when a person has a traumatic experience, they will uh, have a sensory input from it, and that sensory input can also translate into feelings that they have. So if somebody has a traumatic experience and then they're very afraid, their memory, their hippocampus, and other parts of their memory um, remember, so, link that with that emotion. And when we see something that's similar, we hear something that's similar to that experience, our brain does its job by notifying us, danger, danger. You get something in your stomach, or you feel something in your chest, or you go, I'm really scared right now. I don't know why. Your emotions get triggered. And that's because you are having, well, Rothschild talks, and so does van der Kolk, a lot about body memory. And that's what we're talking about when people have body memory. That's not just that they have this image or this thought, but they actually feel it everywhere. Okay? I mean, the good news is that our brains are neuroplastic, and with some intervention, we can change our brains. One of the ways that we do that is through physical movement, exercise. We can enhance our ability to make those changes by eating food that is good for our body and our brain. Our entire immune system is situated in our gastrointestinal tract, so that would be our stomach and intestines. Our neurotransmitters, serotonin, things that make us feel good, things that help us to operate every day, are manufactured. Many of them are manufactured in our gastrointestinal tract, and they're also stored there. The majority of them are stored there. That means that when we need them, we want our gastrointestinal tract to not have to be just sorry, I can't think of the word right now, redirected away from what it needs to do, because we have stuff in our body, in our stomach or our GI tract, that are toxic. And our body, instead of helping us feel better, just try to fight the toxins and don't have enough left over in that moment to do what it really needs to do. So exercise, nutrition. We also know that in our everyday life, that social activities and humor can be very helpful to people. We want to, uh, sometimes therapy is useful, but not everybody feels comfortable. I made a video for you called Choosing Therapy, and we want to teach people that when they come to therapy, that they might find that some of what I do might not be comfortable for them. Things I bring up might not be comfortable. I want to build certain choices and power into that therapy relationship, because people that have been traumatized have had their feeling of power and control compromised, along with trust and relationships, right? My sense of boundaries, how I feel about myself, my internal resources. People around me may not be all that healthy for me, or they might be very good for me. Um, so, when that just kind of reminds me of a story that a friend of mine and I went through the master's program together. And he was a really amazing therapist. He worked a lot with kids and with adolescents. And in addition to that, he was working in the coroner's office in Philadelphia. So family members of people that had been murdered would come into the coroner's office, and he would be available there to have a conversation with them. Nobody had ever done that before. He was really quite good at what he did. He told this great story one time about, sometimes people need to tell the story over and over and over again. And my own experience has been that's true. And sometimes people never want to tell their story. So I don't make people tell their story. We focus on the consequence of their story, how that's affected their everyday life. But I don't need to know the details of what happened to them. And they don't necessarily have to say what they experienced out loud, because we can be pretty sure that many people who have had trauma relive that trauma every day in their head. They remember what happened and who did it and how it happened and what they think they would have, could have, should have done, blaming themselves sometimes. So in this case, this person, Paul, you can look up some of his, Clemens is his last name. He's done a lot of writing around trauma. He was working with a woman, and her storytelling of this, what happened, her son was murdered, and she told the story over and over again. She was kind of, that her family members and friends were a little burned out from hearing the story. They didn't really want to continue to hear the story. So they cooked up this great plan where she had this button made, and she put it on her jacket every day. And the button said, "Ask me about my son's murder." So anybody who was willing to talk about it or listen to it would ask her. And every day she went to work, she was on the bus taking public transportation for about 40 minutes. So she encountered lots of people. And many of those people asked her about her son's murder. And so she got to tell her story without burning anybody out, because, it can be, we'll have to kind of keep in mind that sometimes people are vicariously traumatized. And when, on the days that she didn't want to talk about it, she just didn't put the button on. I thought that was a pretty brilliant plan, because it allows her to have some ebb and flow, power and control over her story. Okay, so this week, let's look at what we're doing this week. We'll go right to learning resources. And you can see that there's our books. We have Chapter 4, Skin Hunger, and Chapter 4, Expressions of Trauma Not Yet Remembered. And then The Minds of Children under van der Kolk, these pages. And then a story, this is from 1996. Sometimes there's articles, you just can't find anything like it. And this is about a woman who had, at the time, it was called multiple personalities. Now it's dissociative identity disorder. And so you want to read about that. And then there's a PowerPoint about neurology, neurobiology, and trauma. That's my PowerPoint. Here is a video of a woman talking about supporting people. So you can watch the first 35 minutes. You don't need to watch the whole thing. You could watch the whole thing if you want to. Another video with Bessel van der Kolk. So affect regulation turns out to be like so very important, because that is what helps us relate in the world. If we're all emotion, we can't see past that emotion to take in knowledge. If we're all logical and we focus just on knowledge, we're so rational, we actually don't have a direction. And it's our emotions that offer our logic some direction in the world. So we can be easily overwhelmed with logic or easily overwhelmed with affect. And we want to find a balance between the two. So another approach that we can use when we are working with someone who's been affected by trauma is something called neurofeedback. And neurofeedback works on brain waves. We all have brain waves. When you don't have brain waves, you are not conscious. You can't think, can't do anything. So we all have brain waves. We all have different kinds of brain waves that help us sleep, brain waves that keep us awake, brain waves that help us relax. And some of these brain waves are in proportion to each other. And when they're in a proper proportion, or they're within a certain range, they're really most beneficial to us. Well, things like trauma can alter our brain waves. And so some of those brain waves might be, in the high realm. Maybe they're too high. Maybe they operate more than anything else. So you don't really want to have beta waves when you're trying to sleep, because beta waves are the things that you really want when you have a project to do, when you're trying to stay awake and be productive. No, when you're sleeping, you want delta waves. But if you're waking up in the middle of the night and you're thinking, that means that you have brain waves operating at a time when they shouldn't be operating. So neurofeedback offers a way to modulate how those, neuroentrainment, I should say, offers a way to modulate those waves. Okay, you can look up more. You could ask me more questions about it. I'll be happy to talk about it. And then this is a very short video. This is a woman who was a child when she was abused. So she doesn't remember the abuse, but she talks about the effect it has had on her. If you are uploading your technique demonstration for week 5, so I have 3 trauma sections. I go to different sections to make the video, but I make the same video for everybody because it's all the same work. This is one place where there's one little difference. So for those of you that are in the online program, you need to go to major assignments in order to submit your technique demonstration. The written paper that also should have the YouTube link on it. That's where I grade your paper. For those of you that are in the on-campus online course, you can go to the module and upload your written document there. Regardless what section you're in, you need to go to the discussion for the technique demonstration and hit reply and put both your link there. So that goes there, so we can just pop into your link and see your technique demonstration, and then also attach the written document, because many students choose to download these and add them to a book for resources and working with clients and themselves. Okay, so this is the first week for technique demonstrations. There will be anywhere between 3 and 5 demonstrations. You need to watch all of them. I do. I watch all of them. And then you're going to post something to each person. So there should be 5 replies here for each person that's uploading their technique demonstration. If you are not, maybe there's only 3, doesn't matter. So you don't reply to your own demonstration. You get a break from that. But you do need to reply to all the others. And so watch and follow along, and after completing You want to, in your response, in a positive and proactive way, same way as you would speak to a client, talk to your peer about how the technique worked for you using nonviolent communication. Remember that from 503? And how it could change to work for you better. So some of the techniques might not be really, you don't feel comfortable with it. That's fine. So say what would have helped you to better use this technique. And then include a sentence or two to share a population that you could use the technique with in your practice. All right. And then that's week 5. That all happens in week 5. This is week 6. In week 6, there's a discussion, just the same as your macro discussion, with a couple of little differences. We have a different chapter from the Perry book called Skin Hunger. And there you are going to talk about the impact of the trauma to this individual from a physical standpoint. Like, so how could that person's brain be changed? What happened to their mirror neurons? Could their genes be affected? I don't mean their blue jeans. And then how their body systems might be affected. Okay, so in the body, inside the body. Then emotional impact. So how might the trauma have affected the person's ability to express their emotions? Next would be psychological, which has to do with thinking. So how could they process the trauma? What might be getting in the way of processing the trauma? Or maybe something that would be helpful. Are they having flashbacks? Could they have self-esteem problems? And then finally, from a social impact perspective, think about the person's ability to cope with and communicate to individual family members, friends. So we're not talking about groups. That's next week. Next, in week 7, you'll talk about groups. But in this case, we're talking about individual interactions. If you have any questions, please ask me, okay? Thank you. Bye.